This is indeed a disturbing universe.
So we finally reached the 5th episode of Season 1, which is the first episode written by John Swartzwelder, who is easily my favorite Simpsons writer, and chances are he wrote more than one episode that's on your top 10 list. Unfortunately, Swartzwelder is not the type to show up in the commentaries, so he never agreed to do one. But there is one episode that he wrote where they did actually call him on the telephone during the commentary, but you don't really get a whole lot from that. Swartzwelder hasn't written for The Simpsons in over 2 decades, and I think you could place that fact in a list of reasons why The Simpsons aren't so great anymore. And it's partially because of John Swartzwelder that classic Simpsons episodes can still be enjoyed today, even by conservatives. Because John Swartzwelder seems to be the only Simpsons writer who doesn't suffer from liberal brain rot, which is probably why he doesn't show up for these commentaries in the first place. And he's really got nothing to prove to them anyway because he's written 59 episodes, and he's moved on now. But the one we're here to talk about today is episode number 7G05, Bart the General. It originally aired on February 4th of 1990, and as I said before, it was written by John Swartzwelder, and it was directed by David Silverman. And of course, the showrunners were Matt Groening, Sam Simon, and James L. Brooks. And the question of whether or not you should skip this episode. Well, it's season 1. And even though this is a Swartzwelder script, and I would say this is our best episode so far, unfortunately The Simpsons still hasn't reached its potential yet. But that being said, this episode is still very watchable. So if you're just in the mood for classic Swartzwelder, I say go for it. And certainly if you've never seen this episode, it's indeed unskippable. But if you're just looking to see the very best of The Simpsons, this ain't it. It's just really, really good for a first season episode. So Bart the General starts off with Bart standing up for Lisa against 3 schoolyard bullies. The main one being Nelson Muntz, who makes his first appearance in the series. Unfortunately, Bart is just outmatched by Nelson, and he's completely unable to defend himself at all, even after getting bad advice from Homer.
So the next time this bully thinks you're going to throw a punch, you throw a glob of mud in his eyes, and then you sock him when he's staggering around blinded.
Yeah.
And if you get the chance, get him right in the family jewels. That little doozy's been a Simpson trademark for generations.
So then Bart goes to Grandpa Simpson to get some advice. And Grandpa takes Bart down to the pawn shop and hooks him up with Herman Herman, that strange one-armed right-wing recluse.
Well, the design of this character is, other than the one arm, is very much inspired by John Swartzwelder.
Yeah, absolutely.
The voice, of course, is
Hello, sir.
a little George Bush.
Thanks to Harry Shearer.
So Herman shows Bart how to turn the entire thing into an all-out war against Nelson. So with the cooperation of all of Bart's classmates, several references to The Longest Day, Full Metal Jacket, and Patton, lots of water guns and water balloons, Bart and his classmates are able to defeat Nelson. Then they force Nelson to sign a treaty. And that's the story of how Bart became a general. Other notable moments that I haven't mentioned yet would include, this episode has no couch gag. According to the internet, this is the first appearance of Old Jewish Man. And yes, that is indeed the name the Simpsons writers gave him. But right now he's just a random no-name character in the background and hasn't become the Old Jewish Man that we all know and love yet. The very odd way that this episode sort of links up with the 3rd episode, Homer's Odyssey, through this story that Herman tells about how he lost his arm.
Mr. Herman?
Yes?
Did you lose your arm in the war?
My arm? Well, let me put it this way. Next time your teacher tells you to keep your arm inside the bus window, you do it.
Yes, sir, I will.
Now, class, remember, do not stick any part of your body out the window. We all know the tragic story of the young man who stuck his arm out the window and had it ripped off by a big truck coming in the other direction.
And I was that boy.
The original idea with Herman was that every single time we saw him in the show, the original plan was that he would be a regular character. He would explain how he lost his arm, and it would be different every time. When you see a sign that says, "Don't stick your hand in the ball return at the bowling alley," you believe it.
And I suppose you could say this is the first time Homer ever said, something or another.
Cupcakes.
But I think the most important detail about this episode is that John Swartzwelder's version of Homer, Marge, Lisa, and Bart are the closest to the versions you see in season 2 than any of the other previous 4 episodes we've already seen. John Swartzwelder just got it right. Some other notable moments would be the dream sequences. And during the DVD commentary that was recorded in 2001, Matt Groening tells this very famous story about John Swartzwelder.
You know, John Swartzwelder, this is his first script. He was and is a fantastic writer on the show, and writes the wildest scripts, I think, that we've ever produced over the years. He himself is quite an eccentric guy. He chain smoker. He drove the biggest Cadillac from the 1950s I've ever seen. He used to be stuck in the middle of the parking lot in front of the Gracie Films bungalow late at night while everybody else was leaving, and his car would be going and he chain smoked, and he used to write these early episodes at coffee shops in the San Fernando Valley. He'd sit at a booth with endless cups of coffee and cigarettes, and that's how he'd write the episodes. And eventually, of course, smoking was made illegal in restaurants around here, and so Swartzwelder went and bought himself a coffee shop booth and had it installed in his home where he smokes and drinks endless cups of coffee and continues to write more episodes than anyone who has ever written for the show.
It's obvious that the Simpsons writers and producers have the utmost respect for Swartzwelder. But even though that may be true, they were still so concerned about the message in this episode that they felt self-conscious that other Democrats might see them as pro-war after watching this. So they tacked on a PSA at the end.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, contrary to what you've just seen, war is neither glamorous nor fun. There are no winners, only losers. There are no good wars.
You know, we were worried about this episode that we thought that was too pro-war. And so we added a tag scene to this whole thing.
Have your cake and eat it too.
Imagine how severe the liberal brain constipation has to be to cause you to put a PSA at the end of your own episode because you're concerned about the views of the writer. So earlier they had mentioned that John Swartzwelder still writes for The Simpsons. That was true back when they recorded this commentary in 2001, but currently he hasn't written a Simpsons episode in just over 20 years. But I believe he has still written more episodes than anyone else. And it's crazy how this episode would pretty much fit right in with season 2. And I gotta say, I still think it's a great episode. I think it may be the most Swartzweldian episode of the first season. I still wouldn't say this is the best episode of season 1, but it's up there. When we get to my favorite season 1 episode, I will definitely mention it. But for now, I think I can just leave it at that. With the 5th episode, we've already revealed who the best Simpsons writer is. And I don't think I'm the only one who thinks that. So I'll be back soon with the 6th episode, Moaning Lisa. And I'll just go ahead and spoil it for you now. I'm not a fan of Lisa episodes. Yeah, I know. Big surprise, right? But I'll be back with that episode regardless. See you soon.